Good morning, everybody. It's Thursday, the 3rd of September. We're back in Found for another Artist Conversations. And today I've got Thomasin Toohie with me, who's made these plates that we're going to talk about. And she's with Gus Payne, who's another member of the Welsh Group, who's going to be talking to her about her work and what she has here in this exhibition. And I'm just going to pan around so that you can see the two of them. Here we are. Hello Thomasin, hello Gus. Over to you both.
So I just started having a look at some of your work. I know a lot of your work from the past as well. You started with painting predominantly and then moving on into some of the ceramics. So I just thought it'd be interesting to explain to people some of those influences. I can see that it seems to be, for me, I can see kind of folklore and those kind of, we see angels and then, but even the cowboys, when we're thinking of folklore, it doesn't seem to be necessarily folklore of Herefordshire or Wales or places that I know you've got links to.
Yeah.
So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that interest in folklore, if that's what it is, and why cowboys and why comic books.
Okay, so yes, I've always been interested in the popular culture aspect of the visual, the visual of that. But the plates are actually related to the music that I play.
Oh, yeah.
So I did a load of artwork for a CD, and for the first time ever, I did it in monochrome or monotone. As you probably know, my work's always been very brightly coloured. And what I found out was that I really liked sort of paring things down to black and white images, with just a little bit of colour added in, just for a contrast.
Yeah.
So it seemed a natural progression then to go from the 2D artwork into ceramics, and because we were doing the 2020 exhibition, I quite liked the idea of doing something that was had a vague function behind it as well. And the 2020 restriction actually really helped me, because I then decided to do a set of 6 plates which were all based around song lyrics that I'd written, and the sort of reason, if you like, that there isn't really a link, a tangible link to Wales. It's that.
Yeah, although it does, once you mention music and popular culture, it does have quite a strong link there, doesn't it? When you think of, the kind of influences people playing music and playing music in through Wales and through most of the Western world, really, kind of, from the Teddy Boys, and then, most of that influence would have come from America.
That's
those kind of.
That's very true.
So so I suppose it just highlights that link that we have to the rest of the world, I guess. For me, anyway, that reference to music makes sense.
That sort of universal language, if you like.
And the idea of using plates as well, all those kind of objects, kind of does link into the idea of folklore, and it does bring it into the home. How many homes would you go in Wales and they've got maybe a picture of a plate, or a kind of a plate on the wall, or a picture of Elvis Presley or someone like that. So it's part of that wider kind of cultural phenomenon, I guess. I like seeing the little skull as well. It makes me think of that kind of Mexican art.
Are they named after songs then, Thomasin?
I think a couple of them are. Yes, I'm sort of increasingly making a link between the music and the art, because I think that everything, as a sort of, when you create something, I think it's nice to have a sort of cohesion between all the forms.
Excellent.
There's a definite narrative in every one of them, isn't there? It's almost like a folktale, a nursery rhyme or something.
And musical notes as well, in some on each one. Picking out some of that there. Excellent. That's really interesting. Thank you. And you were going to then ask Gus, weren't you, about his work that we've got over here. I'm just going to pan into that so that people can see, and we've got a series of 6 small paintings here on the wall, all framed in black, looking really stunning here in the corner, I must say. So yeah, over to you again.
Obviously I've known your work for a long time, and I've always really enjoyed looking at the images, and I think these work well as a series, even though they're probably not a series.
No, I mean a couple of them probably were made around about the same time. That would be a series. Obviously, the guys wearing bobble hats, but they're not a specific series. But I think the kind of way I think, and I suppose the way most artists, yourself especially, there's always some kind of link. I've always got a similar kind of thoughts, I guess, and things that kind of inspire me. Again, linked to mythology to some extent, but not mythology for the sake of it, but mythology for the point, for the symbolic meaning of it, really, rather than, you know, not really interested in Lord of the Rings, which I've been asked, but it's the worry whenever you mention mythology. Nothing wrong with Lord of the Rings, I guess, but that's, you know, this isn't Dungeons and Dragons. This is trying to find something about the human condition, really, which comes through, which expresses itself then through mythologies and religions and that kind of, you know, and that kind of thing, and even dreams.
So it sort of begins with yourself, would you say then?
Yeah. I mean, my early work was very self-reflective. I suppose I'm starting to move a little bit further towards that again, but I think for quite a while I started to step back from it and try to make it a bit broader. But I think as time's gone on, I mean, you can't separate yourself from the world, can you? You know, it's kind of anything an artist does is essentially a self-portrait, even if it's a landscape or whatever. It says something about them. That's what's important about it. So I think I've embraced that a little bit more. And I think I started embracing that a lot more once when my children were born, and I think it was just because I was starting to think about the world that they were about to inhabit, and so it became much more tangible then, much more obvious, that link between me and that outside world and what's important, and just asking myself questions a lot of the time, really.
Would you say that you're sort of primarily a Welsh artist? Do you think there's always something in your work that alludes to that?
Yeah, that's kind of an odd one. I think I probably am, because I lived most of my life in Wales. You know, the only time I lived outside Wales was when I lived in Cheltenham to do my degree. So I think intrinsically it is Welsh. You don't see many. I have done daffodils, but I kind of steer away from some of those more stereotypical things. I think, and I think it's trying to find out. I think for me, it's almost being and living in Wales. You produce Welsh art, and it doesn't really matter. You know, it doesn't have to be self-consciously kind of leeks and daffodils and that kind of thing. And so it's as the artists of Wales, whether we just live here, whether we're born here, whatever I represent, whatever our relationship is. It's us who decides what Welsh art is, not Welsh art deciding what we should do. And so intrinsically I think I am, even though I'm not sure there's any. Probably in the landscapes there probably are things that come through, but you know, I just allow them to come through naturally rather than self-consciously thinking, is this Welsh enough? I think that's just something that happens really.
And did you presume, I don't know if you did any specifically for this exhibition, but do you like working on a small format? Do you
I mean, I like working on both formats really, you know, whether it's large or small, or you know, both. You could say in the middle is that 3, I suppose, every different scale. I find different, you know, it's interesting in different ways really. You can capture something in quite especially for something that's quite personal. I suppose it seems a little bit more intimate to be able to get close to it, and you have to get close to it to be able to see what's going on, and you don't have to step back, which is a different experience from needing to step back and see this wider thing. So I like both ways of working really, whether it's close up and small or whether it's further away. And it tends to be fairly similar application in the sense that it's the brushes that get smaller rather than you know, rather than 2 or 3, you know, rather than one of these images being like so there's a lot more detail in these than they would be in the corner of something that's 6 foot high sort of thing.
Different considerations.
Yeah.
Have you enjoyed putting the work together for this exhibition?
Yeah, I mean it's fun kind of looking at what's there. I've got a box, perhaps 2 boxes full of fairly small work. So yeah, looking at what kind of works together and what I mean, if it's still there, then I still like it to some extent. Because I do go off work quite regularly, quite often, so it's probably only half, if less, that I've still got that hasn't been sold or hasn't gone elsewhere. But yeah, it's quite interesting to see how things can potentially work together, especially when they've over quite a long time scale. Really, there's probably a few years separating the oldest to the newest.
Yeah, because I think for some of the artists, I mean, lockdown's been quite an interesting time for artists, hasn't it? And you know, so for you both to decide what you wanted to put in the exhibition, what that said about you as artists. It's quite, you know, that's been, some people have done work specifically, and for other work it's what am I going to put in this exhibition? And, you know, but, people have come at it in different ways.
Yeah. And I mean, I've been working on some other things for, you know, around lockdown, even though it wasn't about lockdown, it just happened at that time. Yeah, I won't go into, it's probably not a good idea to go into the details of work that's not here.
No. But it'll be interesting in the future, won't it, to look back at 2020, the year, and what people have done in exhibitions and what you've done artistically and what you felt about it afterwards, I suppose.
Yeah. It's interesting to see what those responses are. I've been thinking about, you know, current work, and it's like, does it include masks? I've used lots of masks in the past, you know, to do with nurses and to do with breathing and to do with coal dust and things like that. But then is it like when I was talking about the Welsh stuff earlier, that it becomes self-consciously about lockdown, you know, everybody's got a mask and everybody's...
Yes.
Or do you manage to express it in a different way?
No, that's right. Because Sue Hiley-Harris was saying the other day about her piece with the threads where it's representing the social distancing squares. When you know that, that's really interesting, but equally when you look at it, it's actually just a really beautiful, pleasing grid of lovely threads, and knowing the backstory of a piece of work is changes how you feel about it, really. I went to see an artist earlier in the week who's done a whole series of lockdown paintings, and it's very much got nurses in it and superheroes, and you know, that is what lockdown has been for him, and lockdown bingo, and it was, you know, but that was all about lockdown in a very full-on way. It'd be an interesting record in a different way. So.
I mean, obviously it's important to recognise that as well. You know, the nuts and bolts of what lockdown actually looked like and felt like. And people clapping and NHS signs and people wearing masks. And we were talking earlier about masks, you know, how that affects people, not just the medical way, but, you know, talking to people, you know, if someone's like this, how, you know, do you know what their expressions are and all that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
So as an artist, to create something of, you know, how do you get that expression, especially if you're using kind of figurative means with, you're trying to make some kind of, if you're trying to make a face say something and then it's got this big blob in the middle of it. Yeah. It's like, you know, how do you deal with that? You know, what
I agree.
What are the struggles there?
And interesting for the Welsh Group, from an archive point of view, recording how this exhibition is different to the 2020 that they did, however many years ago it was. Sue, who's here, 20-something years ago. You know, it'd be a different take on it in a different way, isn't it? To sort of in terms of how that goes down as a record. For you as a group in the archive, so fascinating. Well, I didn't know about your musical background, Thomasin, so that was really interesting to hear. And thank you both very much. That's great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.